I'm Joe Pryor. We are coming on the air with breaking news as we follow the latest developments out of Minnesota. Right now in New York, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is taking questions after yesterday's deadly shooting in Minneapolis. An ICE officer shot and killed a 37-year-old woman during an immigration operation. Let's listen in.
That trend to change that's higher than the nationwide average.
If you look across the nationwide average, we have 70% of the individuals that we've arrested and detained have criminal convictions or charges against them, either in this country or other. We're continuing to do our work to bring those criminal illegal aliens to justice, and ICE will continue to get up every day and do what they can to protect New York City. I can have Frank or Ken speak to if you know how many criminal convictions of the 54 had previous to this arrest that they had. I don't know if you have those data points with you. We can get those for you, though. Exactly. The vast majority of them, though, have criminal charges against them or convictions against them as well. Yes.
Where were the 54 people from? Were they all part of the values? And what's the immigration status?
Again, loosely affiliated to the Trinitarios. Want to make that clear. Through connections connections that we made by speaking to them, understanding who they were, where they were operating out of, and contacts that they had.
As we listen right now to Secretary Noem and some other members of the Customs and Border Patrol take questions, we should note this news conference taking place in New York is actually focused on a totally different operation called Operation Salvo, focused on the arrests of 54 different people over the last few months. Many, according to Secretary Noem, are violent gang members. The question part of this just started, so we're listening to see if Secretary Noem is asked about the latest on the situation out of Minneapolis. Let's return.
What I would encourage everyone to do, and especially your elected officials, is to bring everybody together to talk about partnerships and start working with ICE and start working with CBP as we bring criminals to justice. And many times your policies and the rhetoric coming out of elected officials has divided people and pitted them against each other. Our job every day, and what President Trump promised to do, was to protect every single American, no matter where they lived in this country, that he was going to make sure that we weren't going to have more victims in this country. And we are going to continue to do that each and every day. And I'd encourage the leaders in this city and your governor and in other cities and states across this country to work with us rather than opposing us so that we can continue to make our streets safer. Yes, right here.
Hi, Sarah Williamson from Newsmax.
Yep.
This is not the only example, the one that you bring up today, of officers being attacked by alleged gang members in New York City. We also had those officers who were attacked in Times Square back in May. With these examples, has Mayor Mamdani and his administration offered to cooperate when it comes to getting criminal gang members off the streets? Because we know he is not a fan of ICE, but when it comes to criminal gangs, is there any kind of leeway that is being given that?
You know, we're hoping the mayor will work with us to get these criminal elements and especially gang members and terrorist organizations out of New York City. I know he and the president had a productive conversation. Our communication at the Department of Homeland Security
We're going to
has
continue to monitor this news conference with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to see if she answers any questions about the situation in Minneapolis. For now, let's go to Minnesota. That's where NBC's Maggie Vespa is standing by near the shooting scene in Minneapolis. Maggie, I know protests are unfolding not necessarily where you are, but in St. Paul near a federal building this morning. We expect to hear from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in about a half hour or so. Tell us what you're seeing today.
I mean, Joe, we do have a crowd growing behind us, and this is the scene of the shooting yesterday, which happened just 24 hours ago. I'll step out of the way. You can see kind of the growing numbers behind me, and we've had people basically here all night, and now they're kind of growing once again now that daylight is here. And you're right, there is also a growing protest over at the federal building, which effectively is ICE headquarters here in Minneapolis. We have teams there watching that as well. But I think, what we really want to point out is we're watching this press conference, which I think we're going to throw back to as we speak, Joe.
yesterday on that tragic situation was that these individuals had followed our officers all day, had harassed them, had blocked them in. They were impeding our law enforcement operations, which is against the law. And when they demanded and commanded her to get out of her vehicle several times, she did not. So we'll continue to allow this process to unfold and recognize that these law enforcement officers every single day put their lives on the line. They go out and do their jobs. They go out and... This was an act of domestic terrorism, which is perpetuating these policies and procedures that follow a use of force situation like this are continuing to be put in place. So this is standard operating procedure after every use of force situation, is that we follow these procedures and protocols. This situation is no different. Back there. Nope, this young lady right beside you. I'll come to you next.
Thank you so much. Should we expect a surge of agents in New York City, and if so, when?
I would say that President Trump and his administration are focused on protecting people. So we will never telegraph exactly the numbers and operations that we have and where we will be focused on. But I think that when you see violent criminals that are taking advantage of American citizens and putting their lives in jeopardy, our law enforcement officers at DHS will always show up. Yes. I'll come back. I'll come back. Go ahead.
Secretary, the officer involved in the shooting yesterday, has he been suspended or is he still in the field?
The officer went to the hospital. He was hit by the vehicle, went to hospital and received treatment, was released, and is spending time with his family now.
And is he still
yes, sir?
Yes. In Minneapolis yesterday, you said the surge there would continue. While you didn't directly say whether we can expect an ICE surge for civil deportation enforcement, can you explain what a surge is?
I won't describe in detail our law enforcement operations that we have. It's just puts our officers' lives in jeopardy, but they will be there enforcing the laws of this country and upholding the public safety needs that have to happen when it comes to enforcing federal law.
So will this be just Homeland Security investigations?
You know, we've got thousands of officers there, and I'm not opposed to sending more if necessary to keep people safe. Back up here.
Secretary, can you talk a little bit about the experience of the officer and some of his background? How much training did he have? How much training in these types of situations did he have, even if he's from the region?
Yeah, I'm not going to get specific to this officer, but he's an experienced officer that has served a number of years, and we recognize that he acted according to his training, and we have expect that all the policies and procedures of review will be exactly that he acted appropriately to protect his life and the life of his colleagues and fellow law enforcement officers that were there and people that were surrounding.
Secretary Noem.
Yes.
I'd like to get your reaction on some of the rhetoric here in New York City. Mayor Zohar Mamdani responded to the shooting yesterday, saying that this is only the latest horror in a year full of cruelty. He called it an attack on us all, and that New York stands with immigrants today and every day. Also, council members last night at the protest called this fascism. The New York City public advocate, Jumaane Williams, said that your administration is, quote, doing the devil's work, and he asked New York City to stand up and show up. Quote, it's going to be difficult and there are going to be casualties. And the last comment that was made last night at the protest was from New York State Representative Alex Boros, also a Democrat. Quote, not only was the ICE agent's hand on the gun, but Secretary Noem's hand was on the gun. President Trump's hand was on the gun. What is your response to New York Democratic leaders, those particular comments, and the protesters that are outside?
I would say those comments are why we're standing where we are today. That kind of language and that kind of provocative talk, inciting people to take action and perpetuate violence in some cases, is unacceptable, and especially of elected leaders. We have a responsibility to state the facts, to go out and enforce the law. Your mayor just said in that statement that he was going to stand with illegal people who have broken our law before he's going to put New York City citizens first. His job and why he was elected was to protect the people who live here, that had the opportunity to vote for him and have the opportunity to live in this city. They pay their taxes, they go to work every day, and instead the mayor in that statement chose to stand with illegals instead of those individuals who just want the chance to raise their families in New York City and have a part of the American dream.
Secretary,
yes.
minutes ago, the head of Minnesota State Investigations Agency said that they had been cut out of the investigation into the fatal shooting in Minneapolis. Can you explain that reversal?
I'd like to know where they've been and why they're not out on the streets investigating all of these people that are harassing and inciting violence on law enforcement officers right now. They're allowing the situation to be volatile. They're not doing their work. They haven't for years, and maybe they should get to work a little bit on the unprecedented fraud that we've seen in Minnesota and in Minneapolis by people that stole from American citizens and diverted funds away from vulnerable people and programs and services that they needed and put it into their own pockets. Minnesota is a train wreck. It is corrupt, and it was under the leadership of Governor Walz and this mayor that they allowed it to happen, and they let criminals and illegals and people abuse programs and steal the money, and now they're allowing violence to go forward on the streets as well.
Does this also apply to the Minneapolis Police Department, the county sheriffs, the federal authorities at this point? They don't want.
I won't put a blanket statement out like those other individuals will. What I would say is I welcome them to come and help us. Come help us make sure that the streets are safe, that laws are enforced, and that we can do the right thing to make sure that American citizens come first. Yes, sir. They have not been cut out. They don't have any jurisdiction in this investigation. Yes, go ahead. I'm going to speak to this individual right here. Yes.
How do you respond to Americans who have been listening to your comments that this was an act of domestic terrorism, that the officer was hit?
Anytime you take something...
It is in direct contradiction to what they are seeing and watching in the multiple angles that have been released in the last 24 hours.
This vehicle was used to hit this officer. It was used as a weapon, and the officer feels as though his life was in jeopardy. It was used to perpetuate a violent act that this officer took action to protect himself and to protect his fellow law enforcement officers. So we'll let this continue to go forward and follow the same policies and procedures that every use of force situation does. But we've had almost over 100 times that these vehicles have been used to ram law enforcement officers and to do damage and to harm them. When you take an action and use a weapon to harm someone and to incite violence against them and try to cause them injury or death, then it needs to be labeled exactly what it was.
Do you believe the use of force in this instance was commensurate with the actions of that vehicle and the driver?
I would say that when these individuals use their vehicles to try to ram our law enforcement and put their lives in jeopardy, that law enforcement officer has to make a decision to protect his life and the individuals around him as well. Yes.
What did you make of Tom Homan's comments yesterday that we should wait for an investigation before determining, as you have, that in this incident it was self-defense and that he felt that his life was in danger?
You know, I didn't see those comments, but from what I understand, he also put out a statement later as well. So I'll let Tom speak to that. But all of us are on the same page in the fact that this law enforcement officer followed his training and that he defended and acted in defense of his life and those around him.
Secretary Noem,
Yes.
hi. Darla Miles, ABC 7 New York. Two quick questions. First, you said these protesters had been following the ICE agents. Do you have a little bit more of a timeline and can share with us some of those other initial encounters prior to the fatal shooting? And then secondly, can you speak to the closure of the ICE office at Rikers by Mayor Mamdani?
There will be more details coming out as this goes forward in the coming days. And I'll talk more about that closure in the future.
Is there anything else? So can you say if there was how many times that if they had been threatened, like how many other times they?
It had been ongoing throughout the day.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Whatever happened in Minneapolis, a mother of three is dead, an American citizen. Do you have a message for her family today?
Yes, absolutely. And I reiterated this yesterday when I had my press conference in Minneapolis. I asked everybody not to just pray for the officer, but also pray for the deceased family and her loved ones as well. It was a tragic situation that I hope we never see happen again. That's why I'm encouraging all elected leaders to work together so that we can be cooperative in getting dangerous criminals off of our streets.
Do you feel like that you go in with a lot of publicity about these operations? Do you feel like that needs to be revisited so that maybe you go in a little more covertly, or do you need to change the approach at all?
I would say that we have all different kinds of law enforcement operations ongoing with the department at all times. We don't telegraph what they are, the details or specifics, or where we're going to be operating. I would say that there's different tactics utilized for what's appropriate for the situation and the criminal activity we see in the city. Last question?
Do you know the details of Renee Good's harassment of ICE officers early in the day? Were any of those details shared with you? Because apparently it wasn't just at one incident, it was earlier in the day as well.
Yes, it was, and that will be a part of some of the details that we will be sharing in the future. Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I appreciate you focusing on this operation and the 54 criminals that we have gotten off the streets because of the work of this team behind me. We thank all of them for their service and recognize that, again, I'll remind you, tomorrow is Law Enforcement Day. Please take the time to thank a law enforcement officer who's out there keeping us and our families safe. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
There you hear Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem taking questions here in New York City once again, saying that the ICE agents officers were justified, that he feared for his life yesterday when he shot and killed a 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis. Let's go to NBC's Maggie Vespa, who is near that shooting scene in Minneapolis. Maggie, set the scene for us, what you're seeing today and where things stand in Minnesota.
Yeah, well, Joe, we basically had a steady presence of people, protesters, mourners here at the scene since this shooting happened a little more than 24 hours ago. But what was really extraordinary and what we just heard was new information from the secretary and also doubling down on some of the rhetoric that DHS put out yesterday. In particular, she said that the officer was hit by the driver, Renee Good's SUV yesterday. That's new information. DHS didn't say that explicitly yesterday. She said that the unnamed ICE officer was treated at an area hospital, later released, and is now spending time with his family. She also once again called the actions of Renee Good, the local 37-year-old mother who was killed in this shooting, domestic terrorism. And she called Minnesota in particular a train wreck when it comes to, it seemed like, general crime, chaos, but also enforcement of immigration law. And then further, and this is a new update, she denied that a state investigative agency who had previously said that they were working alongside the FBI, and we have some chanting here in the background, to investigate what happened here. She denied that that agency had been frozen out, and that comes like an hour, roughly an hour, after we got a press release from that agency. It's the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, saying that the U.S. attorney had told them they were no longer getting access to basically the evidence in this case, the evidence from the scene, interviews collected by witnesses, that this would be handled solely by the FBI. And as part of that statement, the Bureau, again, the state agency, said regrettably, with no access to the evidence, they had to pull back from the investigation. It was clear frustration woven into that statement. She said, denying that they were frozen out in this press conference that you just heard, and basically said they have no jurisdiction in this case, and this will indeed be handled by federal law enforcement, be handled by the FBI. All of that, Joe, and you and I watched this entire thing in the backdrop of this press conference that started out with nothing to do with Minneapolis. It started for the first 20 to 30 minutes with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and then other speakers up there talking about an Operation Salvo that they say they launched after an off-duty Customs and Border Protection agent was shot in New York back in July, and touting the some 54 arrests, she said, of alleged gang members that have been made in that operation in New York. She talked about tomorrow being Law Enforcement Day, and she stressed that people should be kind to law enforcement officers, even suggested at one point buying ICE officers lunch if you see them. That's getting a lot of traction online, and you can bet a lot of reaction here on the ground, given that it comes, again, 24 hours after an ICE officer was seen on camera from multiple angles. We reviewed the videos shooting a woman here in the head as she drove from the scene. So obviously an incredibly explosive situation here on the ground. Those comments not entirely unlike what we heard yesterday, Joe, but definitely some key developments there from the secretary.
No doubt. And Maggie, also, as you've been reporting, there are many people on the ground there in Minneapolis who want the ICE officer's name released. That has not happened yet, right. But Secretary Noem did give us a little more information when pressed about that officer, saying that he was treated and released. He is with family. Asked if he's been suspended or put on administrative duty. The secretary did not answer that question at all, but she did talk a little more about his experience, correct?
She did, basically saying that he was a veteran of the force, and also saying that he did not want to be named as part of this investigation. Look, we've been asking DHS for information on this ICE officer. We've been asking for any information on whether he's been placed on leave, whether any kind of investigation or any punitive steps or just like preemptive steps in the midst of this investigation have taken place, and it has been solely crickets. So to get that information from the secretary, even just those little tidbits about this officer and kind of about the aftermath of the shooting from his perspective are new, but it's really been minimal, Joe. And so that's the newest information that we have from his end of things.
All right, Maggie, thank you so much for your reporting. We're not just seeing protests there at the scene in Minneapolis, but also in St. Paul near Twin Cities Airport, near a federal building located there. A number of protests have gathered there. We have seen some clashes with federal agents there, including, you can see some tear gas that was shot at the group. We do want to bring in NBC News law enforcement intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Basically, Tom, what we're seeing here is different officials have different interpretations after watching video of yesterday's deadly incident. Secretary Noem, we just heard there, once again defending this ICE officer, calling this domestic terrorism. We know some Minnesota officials have a different take. The governor yesterday telling Minnesotans not to believe what he called the propaganda machine. We expect to hear from Governor Walz in just over 15 minutes. Also, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey using much stronger language, telling ICE basically to get out of town. And Tom, now we have sort of this clash we're hearing between sort of federal and state investigators. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension there in Minnesota saying they're not going to be part of this investigation, that the feds, the FBI, will solely be responsible. Just tell us more of what we're learning about this and how this investigation is going to proceed.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different things there. It seems like everybody has their own interpretation on the same video that we've been watching here for the last 24 hours. With respect to the last thing that you mentioned, the state investigation versus the FBI investigation, it is fairly common. I've seen in the past where there's a use of force case that state investigators want to be involved along with the FBI. And so that's something that we've seen. And we've seen because of the way that the different agencies operate that sometimes in a state investigation, I'm thinking of an investigation that was adjacent to the Boston Marathon bombing. There was a use of force incident in the Orlando, Florida area, and the local state's attorney there, or similar to a district attorney, was able to release a full report that detailed their findings and found that the shooting was justified. That was at least helpful in terms of, selfishly, us as reporters getting information, sharing it with all of you, but also just the general public who was able to view that report. It appears here, based on the statement from the BCA, which is the statewide investigative body in Minnesota, what they had said early on in the investigation is that they would be joining the investigation with the FBI. That was approved by the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. That's the federal prosecutorial office in Minneapolis. And then apparently the U.S. Attorney's Office told the FBI to tell the BCA that they will not be involved in the investigation as it occurs. Now, the BCA has said they expect the FBI to conduct a full, comprehensive investigation, and at the conclusion of that investigation, share their investigative files not only with the U.S. Attorney in Minneapolis, but also with state prosecutors, potentially for them to look at it. That could be important in this case because the state law is different than the federal use of force policy as it pertains to this particular ICE officer. And then what happens if there's a state charge that could be removed to federal court? There could be an argument that would be made that this individual was a part of federal supremacy law, effectively make the argument, look, this person was working in their capacity as a federal officer. They can't be tried on state charges. Or the judge could rule that they could be charged on state charges, but it would follow the rules of federal court. We're about 8 or 9 innings down the road, and we're barely out of the top of the first inning, just as an analogy in terms of timeline on this. And, of course, that presumes, a potential case. And right now, there's no indication, at least from the DHS Secretary, that there's a case to be had here. So we'll see where the investigation goes with that. On the state investigative front, she did say, quote, they don't have any jurisdiction. She's referring to Secretary Noem there, the BCA, as I was referencing. So that's where this stands at this hour. The FBI is going to conduct an investigation. The DHS use of force policy, which covers ICE, is very clear that effectively if the officer believes that there is a reasonable, that's going to be a key word here, a reasonable danger to their body, I'm paraphrasing here, a danger to their life or a serious injury, that they can use deadly force, they're not prohibited to fire into a vehicle in order to try to stop a fleeing car, but if that car is to be used as a weapon, then they are able to fire into the car. That's according to their policy. So a lot of key questions here remain. Key questions. We saw a piece of video or a number of pieces of video yesterday. What happened before those videos were started to be recorded on? That's going to be a critical question. They're going to conduct ballistics analysis. Where was the officer when the shots were fired? Was it just one officer that fired the shots? How many shots were fired in total and from what angle and direction? As you well know, Jacob, we're going to see a lot of video potentially from homes nearby, Ring cameras, those types of things, and eyewitness statements that'll come forward. So, look, there's going to be a lot of information here that comes in that'll form this investigation. There's a big question as to whether or not those ICE officers had body-worn cameras. Those are in the process of being rolled out, but is not something where every ICE officer has them. So that policy is something that'll be part of the investigation. Should they have had them on? Were they not ready yet? This particular group to have them? Had they not been distributed? All sorts of questions that we'll have. And, of course, what happened in the interaction when they approached the vehicle yesterday? And so all of this is happening in real time, is going to take a long time. While you see the images that are next to me here on screen of people that are clearly upset about this issue and are in the process of protesting in a city and a place that has had an awful lot of that over the years, in obviously some strained relationships with law enforcement, speaking specifically of the George Floyd killing. So putting it all together, this is a complicated issue, a complicated scene. The president himself has weighed in on the issue, saying he didn't like the shooting, but believed that it was justified in some substance in an interview with the New York Times, at a social media post. So everybody is paying attention to this issue. It's just that the answers in a total investigation take some time, and obviously that's going to require some patience as well, Jacob.
And you mentioned the history here in this part of Minneapolis, the shooting that happened yesterday, happening about 10 blocks from the scene of where George Floyd was killed nearly 6 years ago. And that, of course, many scars there opened up once again for people living there in Minneapolis. Tom, we've seen this video and we've noticed how different people have different interpretations of the video so far. Clearly, that will be dissected as part of the investigation. But one of the things we don't fully know is what exactly happened beforehand. We just heard Secretary Noem saying that the officers were being followed and harassed and impeded against throughout the day yesterday. But one of the key questions is going to be perhaps what led up to the things we have seen on video, right?
Yeah, that to me is a real important question at this point. Had they encountered this driver in this vehicle before? What did Renee Good, if anything, said to them previously? And then that interaction at the door when they get to the driver's side door, was she panicking? Was she making any statements at all? Was she threatening the ICE officers? These are just things we don't know. And that's going to be a critical part of the investigation, obviously. So we're going to have to get some more details. But how that all went down, and that's why I specifically referenced the Ring camera. How does this vehicle, how were they previously interacting with the officers? Were they slowing them down? Were they getting in the way? Then they're kind of at that angle there, perhaps impeding the ICE officers. Again, need to get more information on that, or perhaps not. That's all going to be part of this investigation. So as important as it is, the things that happen at the instant this shooting happened, what happened, I would say, in the 3 to 4 minutes before we start seeing these videos, in speaking with investigators, and I want our audience to be clear, I've looked at these reports and these investigative reports for well over 10 years on these officer-involved, federal agent-involved shootings. So that's where I'm drawing these questions from, the experience from, as well as speaking to retired members of law enforcement, not only in all parts of this country, but specifically from the Minnesota, Minneapolis area, and in speaking with legal experts about the issues of the law, people that have done these types of cases before. So that's the kind of informing the questions that we're asking here today and the things that they could be looking at.
All right, Tom Winter, appreciate your reporting. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, we heard plenty from the president yesterday as the situation was unfolding. Obviously, we just heard Secretary Noem once again repeating basically what she said yesterday, strongly supporting the ICE officer, saying the shooting was justified, also calling this, quote, domestic terrorism. What else are we hearing from the White House?
Well, to be clear, we're going to hear more from the White House within the next 45 minutes or so. We're expecting to hear from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, at a briefing that was only announced a short time ago. She'll be joined by the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who I suspect will be the latest in what has been a parade of members of the Trump administration who have come out reflexively in defense of the federal immigration enforcement efforts right now, based even on limited information. Just yesterday, we saw the president come out quickly with a post. He was pushed on it by our colleagues from the New York Times yesterday when they met with him in the Oval Office. As it relates to J.D. Vance, he said, among other things, and I think this echoes what you'll hear from him today, he said, "You can accept that this woman's death is a tragedy while acknowledging, in his words, it is a tragedy of her own making," effectively blaming her for what took place. "Don't illegally interfere in federal law enforcement operations and try to run over our officers with your car. It's really that simple." The president, speaking not too dissimilarly in his comments, initially he described it as vicious, said that she tried to run over the individual, that ICE agent yesterday. Later, after the video was replayed, he asked one of his assistants, his aides, to play the video for the reporters. He said, well, that she tried to run him over. Suffice to say, that's sort of the president's position on this, and it's not surprising because he has been, tried to make it very clear that he supports all the efforts by ICE agents throughout the country. There was one reference as we were listening to Kristi Noem a short time ago in that news conference in New York City, talking about the border czar, who is in effect one of her colleagues in federal law enforcement in this country, Tom Homeland, who said, among other things in a new interview, let the investigation play out and hold people accountable based on the investigation. He was less inclined to have a sort of near immediate conclusion about what happened here. But, having covered this White House for now 13 years, or White Houses over the course of 13 years, this is anomalous. This president and his aides are usually very quick, not surprisingly, usually very quick to come to their conclusion about a situation compared to past presidents of both parties who have traditionally been inclined to say, hey, we're going to let the process play out. That's obviously not the way that President Trump and his team views this.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you so much. We will have much more ahead here on NBC News Now. We expect to hear from Governor Walz shortly. Also online at NBCNews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Joe Fryer. We return you now to NBC News Daily.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.